Hello, everybody, and welcome to all our new students. Welcome to our International Student Information session. Today's topic is about immigration. So throughout the week, there'll be various online sessions and recordings available for new students coming for fall 2024. So you can start to learn more of important details about your journey as an international student at Memorial University of Newfoundland. And so today's session is being presented here by the Immigration Advising Team. There's myself, I'm Natasha Clark, and Penise, who you'll meet a little later on, and our colleague Reef, who was not able to join. So just as a reminder for those who have and are joining us, please ensure that your microphone is muted. We'd like to direct your attention to the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we will have lots of time for a question and answer session. Okay, next slide, please, Penise. So we would like to begin our session with a land acknowledgement, and that is to say that we acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We encourage everyone to reflect on the lands where you're located and the Indigenous people for whom these lands are traditional territory. And we perform this land acknowledgement so that we can start to appreciate our position and where we are within this land. Canada has a very dark history when it comes to colonization and settlement, and what those settlers have done to the Indigenous populations which were here. And the land was essentially taken from them. And the lands where we are here in Newfoundland and Labrador were originally settled by those diverse Indigenous groups, the Beothuk, which are unfortunately no longer with us, and is a population that has suffered genocide at the hands of that settlement. And it is important for us to acknowledge that, as it's something that for many, many decades in Canadian history has not been spoken about freely. There are many people who may not know about that history, and we won't know about it unless we talk about it. We can't reconcile with our Indigenous peoples unless we talk about it and bring that truth. So it is something we like to take a moment to reflect on at the beginning of all of our sessions, and you'll see that as we go through. And if you have questions about that, there are certainly resources. There's wonderful training. You can get to learn more about Canada's history there and why we do that and what efforts Memorial and other places are undertaking towards indigenization and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And so another acknowledgement we would like to provide is an ancestral honoring and labor acknowledgement. And that is to acknowledge the labor theft extracted from people of African descent and used to build European wealth and economies globally and in the Canadian nation state, including Newfoundland and Labrador shipbuilding and cod fishery industries through the violence of transatlantic enslavement. So Canada certainly was part of the slave trade where many people of African descent were brought over, were enslaved, and really worked and built a lot of the infrastructure in Canada and many of these European and Western nations. And there continues to be, much like, the dark past and history of Canada with the Indigenous peoples, a lot of harm that continues, intergenerational trauma, and racial discrimination, especially anti-Black racism, that does exist. And it's important to acknowledge that. And I think it's interesting in a session like this, immigration advising, right? If we look at Canada's immigration past, this is an example, and there are many more, where certain people were favored and others were treated very poorly, right? When many people from China came over, they were taxed, whereas other populations weren't. So it's important to acknowledge that and to know that Canada still has a lot of work to do. Racism certainly does still exist, and we here at the Internationalization Office really hope you have a wonderful experience. But if these things do creep in, there are supports available for you to connect with people, even within your own culture, to get that support and counseling. All right, next slide, please, Penise. All right. So before we kind of get into the bulk of the topic, which is about immigration advice, just a reminder that we're going to hold all questions till the end. We will not be taking questions through the chat. In the chat, I have put a link to a Slido to a Q&A, which you can access, and that's where we'll be monitoring the questions at the end. All right. And next slide. So now I want to take an opportunity to introduce you to our team. So while you are an international student at Memorial, there are many different services that will be available to you to help you both in your academic journey and your non-academic journey. So we are just a small part of that, but we are here for you not just at the beginning, but also throughout your journey here at Memorial as an international student, and that is our immigration advising team. In Canada, immigration advising is a regulated profession. So not just anybody can answer your questions when it comes to, can I work? Does my study permit let me work? Well, my study permit's about to expire. What documents do I need to extend it, right? Because it's a regulated profession, only those who are either an immigration lawyer or regulated consultant can provide that advice. So myself, Reef and Penise, and you see our pictures here on the screen, are regulated, and we are the advisors here at the university that you can turn to if you have any questions. So I'll introduce myself first. So I'm Natasha Clark. My pronouns are she and her, and I would like to recognize that I'm an uninvited settler here in the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk Mi'kmaq in Newfoundland. My ancestors came over from the United Kingdom several generations ago, so we are settlers here. I've grown up and was raised here in St. John's in Newfoundland and Labrador. I have my undergrad degree from Memorial, a master's degree from Toronto Metropolitan University. I've been working in this area for about 18 years, so have a great deal of knowledge in helping to support our students when it comes to their study permits and that sort of thing. Arif, who is not with us here today, has been working at Memorial for the past 6 years and has many experience working as an international student advisor across various institutions within the country of Canada. Arif's pronouns are he or they, them. So I'd like to now pass it on to Penise for an introduction.
Thank you, Natasha, and hi everyone. My name is Panis. I have joined Memorial University last year, and I'm also a licensed international student immigration advisor. Before joining MUN, I was working for another institution. I was also an international student in the past, so I have lived your life, so to speak, and come here with experience in different, I would say, stages of your life in Canada, international student life in Canada, and happy to share my experience and help you through this journey.
Great, thank you, Penise. We'll go to the next slide. So we're going to be discussing a lot of different things. This is kind of your introduction to important immigration regulations that you'll need to abide by and know about as an international student here in Canada. So one thing we'll be talking about was what is the difference between a visa and an ETA, and between that and a study permit, and what is the importance of your passport. So we'll be talking about the many different immigration documents you will bring with you and that are important as you're an international student in Canada. Second is we'll be describing how your enrollment status, so that is your registration at Memorial, how that's going to impact your eligibility to work and to study, and what it means to kind of maintain compliance with those conditions on your study permit. 3 is we'll define key Memorial terms for immigration purposes. You're coming here to Canada to study on a study permit. It is closely linked to your studies here at Memorial, so it's important to have an understanding of those key terms and how it may impact your immigration status. Number 4, we'll be discussing the co-op work permit. So we'll talk about what's needed if as part of your program you need to undertake a work placement. Number 5 is that we'll also be discussing about a postgrad work permit, which is a program you might be eligible for upon completion of your studies. And even though you're just starting, it's important to think and plan ahead if these are part of your immigration goals. Number 6 would be to identify 3 sources of immigration related information, a way you can find reliable and correct advice, because we know there's a lot of stuff out there. And number 7 is about navigating the support. So how we can support you through our online course shell and Brightspace, as well as other ways. And number 8 would be to identify what way then you can connect with a member of our immigration advising team. So I'm going to hand it off to Panisse now to get really into detail about those things.
Thank you, Natasha. So we're going to start with passports. All of you guys need to have these travel documents such as passports in order to come to Canada. The country of your citizenship issued passports to you, and what is important is that and I'm assuming like you guys attending maybe are outside Canada, haven't come to Canada yet, or some of you may have. We're going to look at both scenarios here. When you apply for your study permit, you use this passport, and based on the expiry date of the passport, you may receive the study permit accordingly. What does that mean? Is that maybe your studies last 3 years, but your passport would have expired in a year or two. So expect that your study permit get issued to the expiry date of the passport, because the expiry date of the passport always comes first, and then the study permit basically will be issued based on that. So anytime, let's say you come to Canada and then you need to renew your study permit, that means you need to get your passport renewed first. So have that in mind, and as I mentioned, the country of your citizenship issued those passports. So any questions you may have about renewing passport, you need to connect with the related consulate in Canada or elsewhere in order to get the information as to how to renew your passport when required. So if you're from a visa required country, once your study permit got approved, Immigration Canada asks for your passports. You send your passport to Immigration Canada, and then you receive this visa on your passport. So visa, or is TRV, temporary resident visa, it has an expiry date. It's issue date, whenever it's issued, and expiry date. And as you can see here as an here as an example, it determines that when you can enter Canada, it has an expiry date on it. So it's not, visa is not your status, it is just for you to enter Canada. And you will see here as multiple means you can enter Canada multiple times. This visa is valid, and so it's not giving you authorization to study or work, but it's just simply for you to enter. If you're not from a visa required country, then you receive an ETA. ETA is something that gets kind of electronically attached to the passport, so that would be a different scenario. In the future slide, we're going to look at the study permit, but this is the visa for you, again, to enter, but it's not your status. It can be renewed in Canada in the future when it's required. And once you enter Canada with this visa, that's the time that you're going to introduce your letter, the letter of introduction that you received as part of your study permit approval, in order to receive your study permit at the border, which we're going to look at it in the upcoming slides. Here is a quiz to test that, test what we just talked about. So we want to see what's your answer on you can enter Canada with an expired TRV. Do you think this is correct or not? And I cannot see the answers. Maybe Natasha can look at that.
So we'll use the chat function.
Uh-huh.
Perfect. So we have several
Okay.
people saying that the answer is false. False, false, false.
Oh,
So
no.
excellent. Everybody was right there. That's very important to know.
Thank you. Number 2, visa authorizes international students to work on or off campus. Do you think it's correct or not?
So we have several people saying true.
True. Okay. So as I
Another
mentioned,
false. Yep.
and some false. Okay. So visa, n- as I mentioned, is just for your entry to Canada. It is not your status in Canada, meaning that it doesn't authorizes you to study or work. We're going to look at the study permit in the next slide. That would be your status in Canada as a student. So have this in mind. Your visa that is attached to your passport does not authorizes you to study or work. That is just for entry to Canada. Question number 3, visa can be renewed from within Canada. That's
So yep,
correct.
true. Yep. Good. Everybody's right there.
Okay, so this is the study permit, like an example of a study permit. When you entered the border, you came to the Canadian border. It could be Toronto, Montreal, depending on where you land first. The very first port of entry would be the Canadian border. You will go through the process and you will receive this study permit. So that you definitely see a CBSA officer, so Canada Border Service agent. So do not leave that area before receiving your study permit. Sometimes we have students that maybe they have a transit and then they forget about receiving the study permit. So study permit needs to be received at the very first port of entry to Canada. So once you receive this study permit, you will see that, some demographic information will be shown here at the first paragraph here, and then additional information. So it has when it's issued, so at the border when they issue it, that's the date will go there, and expiry date of the study permit that will be determined by the officer at the border. The institution you're going to attend, field of study, so those stuff will appear here. Sometimes it happens that you may have changed programs, so don't be too picky around the field of your study if it wasn't the same as your program you're attending now. What is important really is really important expiry date, so pay attention to that, which you know that how long your status going to be valid in Canada, and perhaps you need to renew that before expiry date. We are here to help you how to renew your study permits. Again, Immigration Canada policies are very broad. It has so much of details. There is no room to go over all of those details in this session, but we are trying our best to give you most important information. So conditions of the study permit will basically tell you that maybe there is restriction in terms of certain fields that you cannot study or you cannot work. Your work authorization will be appearing here. So it will be like you may accept employment on or off campus based on whatever policy, or you may not work in the childcare. So those conditions will be appear here that you need to pay attention to that. And if you have any questions on those or doubts, we are here to help you. And this is the study permit that we are talking about, the authorization to study or work. So work authorization, again, we're going to appear under the conditions of your study permit. The expiry date you need to pay attention to and renew that before the expiry date. You cannot start working even if you have the conditions to work until school starts. So that is, again, one of the immigration policies, that you need to be a full-time registered student, and you cannot start working until your school starts. We're going to talk about study permit and work in the future slides, and then let's go through some quiz tests. Number one, study permit allows you to enter Canada. True or false? That's correct. It's false because study permits, it doesn't allow you to enter. That was the visa that we looked at, so ETA or TRV. Those are the authorizations for, as long as they're valid, they allow you to enter Canada. A study permit allows you to study or work based on the expiry date and other conditions that we already discussed, or we're going to look at in the future slides. Question number two, the study permit authorizes you to work if you meet the conditions. Correct. So study permit allows you to work if you meet the conditions, meaning that as long as it's valid, you are a full-time student, school hasn't started. So many other conditions that you need to meet in order to be able to work. The study permit cannot be renewed from within Canada. Yes, that's false, because you can renew your study permit within Canada. And we discussed the relation to the passport. So we said your passport needs to be valid in order to renew the study permit in Canada and provide certain documentation. All right. Some key terms at Memorial University, and generally speaking, these key terms could vary institution to institution. So we're going to look at Memorial University and how certain terms are defined. Academic year, it's basically, you can look at the school calendar, which shows, so we would say September to August would be the academic year. And then we have different terms, meaning like winter term, or we may refer to other terms like spring term. So winter term means January till April, and then spring, which is May to August. Defining full-time or part-time. So when it comes to those registration statuses, it matters whether you are undergrad or you're a grad student. So as an undergrad student, full-time could be as long as you're registered for 9 credit hours. That would be full-time. Or grad students, full-time, I think you would be, as long as you're registered under the 9,000 course, you'll be full-time. I recommend anytime you want to verify whether you are part-time or full-time, you can reach out to the academic area. That would be the best way to find out whether you are part-time or full-time. In order to be able to work in Canada based on your study permit, you must maintain full-time status in Canada. Also, full-time status would matter when it comes to postgrad work permit. So what you need to know is that you need to maintain full-time status during your studies. Schedule break, again, if you are, it matters whether you are a grad student or undergrad student. To define schedule break, I would say scheduled break is a break as part of your program. So program is designed in a way that you may take a fall. Fall could be your term 1, and then winter would be your term 2, and then spring would be your scheduled break, meaning that you're not scheduled to take specific courses during that time. So that is a scheduled break. Grad students do not have any scheduled break. So that has been established by the grad studies that grad students do not have any scheduled break. And schedule break becomes important when we are defining work authorization, whether you're able to work during schedule break or not, and we're going to look at it at upcoming slides. Leave of absence. Grad students, they may have a process in order to have a leave from your studies. It needs to be authorized in order to not to have consequences for your study permit in Canada, postgrad work permit, and it should not be more than 150 days. But again, we can look at that and other slides. So the relation of a leave of absence and being able to study or work or stay in Canada, we can look at it at other slides. There is no process for leave of absence for undergrad students. And academic suspension is basically school policy. If you're not doing well academically, which will be determined by your academic area, you will be suspended from continuing with your studies. That could be 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms, and it has its own process in order to join your program again. If those circumstances happens, which we hope never happens, you need to connect with us so we look at the immigration side of it. So our team only looks at immigration side of what happens at the academic area. So you can connect with us at any time if you have immigration questions around those matters. So 4 things you need to know about your study permit and work authorization. One is do not let your study permit to expire. So as we mentioned, the expiry date of the study permit, it is mentioned there on your study permit. So pay attention to that. And you are required to apply for the extension of the study permit before the expiry date. Once you do that, it's called maintained status, meaning that you can continue to study or work as per the conditions of your study permit. You still need to be registered full-time, in order to work, but as long as you apply for the extension of the study permit before expiry date, you can continue to do so. If for any reason you forgot, or maybe your passport wasn't ready, for any reason you don't apply for the extension of the study permit before expiry date, and that study permit expires, you are now out of status. So out of status meaning that you don't have that student status in Canada, so your status is not valid, you're not able to work or study. You will have the opportunity to restore that status, but that needs to be done within 90 days of losing the status. You need to have proper documentation, and unfortunately, you're not able to study or work until that status is restored. And note on the side is that once you complete a program, so let's say you graduate from an undergrad program, then that study permit, even if it's valid 2 more years, study permit becomes invalid after 90 days of finishing a program. And you're expected to be a registered full-time student. Once you come to Canada as a student, that is the expectation from Immigration Canada. And they refer it to as actively pursuing your studies. So Immigration Canada expect you to actively pursue your studies and be a registered full-time student. For any reason, it could be medical, financial, or any reasons that you are not able to be registered for a term, that is called basically not being registered. The grad study does have a process for authorized leave, meaning that you have discussed that maybe there was a medical issue and for a term you couldn't attend, then you get that authorization from the grad studies. And the length of that matters, though. Again, that should not be more than 150 days in order to not to negatively impact your permits or postgrad work permits and eligibility for other permits, basically, which I don't want to really get to those details here. But undergrad students do not have that, so there is no really an authorized leave. So gap in studies, so have this in mind, gap in studies could impact future permits such as postgrad work permits, and during your studies, if there isn't a gap, so if you're not a registered student for any reason, if you're not a registered student, you're not able to work. So you don't have that work authorization. Always read the condition of your study permit. So because as we discussed, the condition of the study permit give that work authorization. So if the conditions, you read that, and is restricting you from working in a certain field, so you need to make sure you adhere to that. And or if they if like there is no work authorization mentioned on the conditions, then you're not able to work, and you need to connect with us in order to look at it and discuss how to get that work authorization if you're eligible to do so. Study permit may authorize you to work, as we said, but you need to meet certain conditions. In order to work, you must be a full-time student. So let's say first term, like we have had some students that they didn't have enough of courses to take, they were part-time, so you're not able to work if you're a part-time student. The only part-time registration that you are able to actually work is that very, very last term when you're graduating, and it's just maybe one course maybe left, and you're part-time. That's the only time that you can work. Otherwise, you must always be a full-time student in order to have the work eligibility. And as we said, if you are not a registered student, you do not have work authorization. Immigration policies changes, but right now, if you are a full-time student, you would be able to work up to 20 hours off campus, and there is no limit of hours for the on-campus work. Then we also talked about schedule break. If you remember, we said schedule break is a break that is part of your studies, but grad students do not have schedule break. So if you are in a schedule break, let's say you do have a valid study permit, you're an undergraduate student, you do have working conditions on your study permit, then you would be able to actually work full-time during the schedule break, which is part of your program. We run many sessions during the year, and also we are available. So please reach out to us anytime you have a doubt on a work authorization or you would like to verify something. You must have a social insurance number in order to get employed and work. And we do have, it's called SIN, SIN clinics that we have those on, running by my colleagues, and you can attend those or get information on how to get social insurance number. This is, again, social insurance number. It is not your work authorization. Work authorization is the study permit, is your registration, and all of the other conditions that we talked about. Social insurance number is just simply something that is a number you receive in order for the employer to collect taxes and report certain employment documentation and so on. So let's go through the quiz. Question number 1. Undergrad students can work full-time during their scheduled break. True or false? That's correct. So undergrad students, if they do have a break as part of their program, they would be able to work. Question number 2, graduate students do not have any schedule break and as a result cannot work more than 20 hours off campus during their program study. Correct, graduate students do not have any schedule break. Question number 3, part-time students are eligible to work. True or false? That's correct. It is false. Part-time students do not have work authorization. As we mentioned, in order to be able to work, you need to have a valid study permit. You need to be registered full-time. You need to look at the conditions of your study permit. And the only time that you are able to work as a part-time student is if that part-time registration is at the very, very end term and you have always maintained full-time registration during studies. Question number 4. The students who are on leave, which is authorized leave or unauthorized, are not eligible to work on and off campus. So is it true or false? Correct. So if you are not a registered student, as we discussed, if you are not a registered student, whether you took a leave which was authorized from grad studies or it wasn't authorized, you just took a leave and there was no process for that matter. So regardless, anytime you're not registered, you are not able to work. Now let's look at co-op work permit. So some programs, they have, let's say, work component as part of their program. So this could be on their let's say co-op term or internship. It's just a work component of the program, and it's not something that you choose to do so. For example, you cannot come up with a internship and choose to do an internship and try to obtain a co-op work permit. No, that internship or that co-op, that work component needs to be part of the program. So if you are in that situation, meaning that there is a work component of the program, then you need to obtain a separate work permit. It's called co-op work permit. Some of you guys may already have applied for this co-op work permit as part of your study permit. So when you were outside Canada, you applied for study permit plus co-op work permit because you already knew, this co-op term was part of your program. you may are in a situation that, co-op term was part of the program. You didn't know, you only applied for study permits. You would be able to apply for this permit once you come to Canada. If an application is under process, let's say your study permit application is under process, then we are not talking about that scenario. So you either applied for a study permit plus co-op work permit from outside Canada, or you need to come to Canada and apply for this co-op work permit once you receive your study permit. So in order to obtain co-op work permit, you need to first, have this valid study permit, and get a letter from the co-op department that confirms, yes, this program has a co-op term and is not more than 50% of the program length. Then we help you to apply. We also have sessions again to apply for this co-op work permit separately. And as mentioned, again, co-op cannot go beyond the study permit expiry date. So if you find yourself in a situation that your study permit is also expiring very soon, in a month or so, then you apply for study permit plus co-op work permit. There are different scenarios out there, so that's why it's very specific. If it's specific to your case, please reach out to us and we're going to look at your case. Co-op work permit itself is free of charge, but it's very lengthy in processing time. So if you're in that program and you know you need a co-op work permit, once you came to Canada and received your study permit, apply immediately. And let's look at this quiz. Question number 1. To obtain a co-op work permit, you must be in a program where co-op is a mandatory part of the studies. True or false? True. That's correct. So if you're not in so if you're in a program that co-op is not mandatory part of the program, you cannot obtain this work permit. Question number 2. The application fee for the co-op work permit is $500. That's false. As we mentioned, it is free of charge. Thank you. Another slide. Okay, postgrad work permit. So this is for future, and again, as we always say, all information that we say is based on the current immigration policies. Postgrad work permit, as it carries its name, after graduation work permit. So Immigration Canada has this program which is called postgraduate work permit. So you cannot really apply now, it's after you graduate. After you graduate and you meet certain conditions, which could be very detailed, you would be able to apply for this. You may be able to apply for this postgrad work permit. Generally speaking, if you want to stay in Canada after graduating from a program and you're eligible, some of these criteria are as below, which is program must be a minimum length of 8 months. And you must be a full-time student. So as we discussed, I think many times already, you are expected to maintain full-time status, and that is one of the main keys or conditions in order to apply for postgrad work permit. So having a full-time status, other than very, very last term, okay to be part-time. And your studies, you must attend in person. So any courses that are offered in person, you're expected to take in-person classes. However, it is only up to 50% of the program could be done online, but in Canada. and you must not break any condition of your study permit. What does that mean? Is that let's say one of the conditions is you should not have any unauthorized work. So you have to always pay attention to the study permit conditions. Another one is actively pursuing studies. So if there is any gap in your studies or long gaps or and is not authorized, those could make you ineligible for the postgrad work permit. So what we said now here is just generally speaking, we are not really looking at the details, but if you your program itself, so just to summarize, your program must be postgrad work permit eligible. Meaning that it's you must like the length of it must be at least 8 months. You have to be registered full-time students, and up to always taking in-person courses were offered, and definitely not more than 50% of it to be online, and pay attention to the condition of the study permit. Yes, if any question you have about postgrad work permit during your studies, you find yourself that you may not be able to attend a term, you know that you would have difficulties down the line in terms of registration, please reach out to us in order to get information of any consequences that may have as an international student in Canada. Question number 1, postgraduation work permit is an open work permit. And we didn't touch base on that, but open work permit is a permit that you can basically have in order to work for any employer. So postgrad work permits, it is an open work permit, and you can use it to work for an employer, and it's one-time opportunity. So I already answered question number 2. It's one-time opportunity, meaning that if you have a plan to study further, let's say after undergrad after your undergrad program, you would like to do your master, perhaps do not apply for postgrad work permit, and then after finishing the second program, apply for postgrad work permit. But I don't want to look at cases right here, but reach out to us if you have any plans and you want to ask about postgrad work permit. We'd be able to help you, but it's one-time opportunity. So in your life, you only as an international student, you only can apply for postgrad work permit once. So if you exhausted that, you already received a postgrad work permit in the past, you cannot apply for postgrad work permit again. Question number 3, to obtain postgrad work permit, the students must be continuously full-time, except during their scheduled break and last semester of studies. Yep, that is true. In order, based on current policies, based on current postgrad work permit policies, you must continuously be full-time, and the only time that perhaps is okay not to be registered is if you have a scheduled break as part of your program, or you're part-time at the very last term. All right. Sorry, so much of information. I'm gonna pass it to Natasha.
Great, thank you so much, Denise. All right, yeah, so that's a lot of really important information. It's good to have a basic understanding. So, we don't expect you to remember everything, but hopefully we've laid it out simple enough that, you'll know, okay, what did they say this, or what does this mean, right? It's really important to, I think, understand that anytime there's a change in your enrollment status, there can be immigration impacts. So if you're wondering what those are, where should you go for information? The first source of information listed here is Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, which is the Canadian government department responsible for the immigration programs. So they are the source, right, of all the information. And so that's where I would recommend you go if you're looking for web-based information. Make sure it comes from canada.ca. Certainly, if you Google something and you see something pop up, you might make it look like it has the maple leaf there. It might make it look like it's coming from the government. It's not necessarily. So make sure it's canada.ca and coming from the Immigration Canada website directly. Another is if you have questions about that information on the website. As I said, you should connect with an immigration consultant or a lawyer. So they are trained, they're certified and licensed to be able to interpret that information and then give advice accordingly. Okay. So it is the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants, CICC, that regulates that profession. So myself, Penise, and Arif, we all are licensed under this organization. You can search us if you go to their website. You can see that we currently have a valid license, that's in good standing. If you want to ask a consultant outside or external to the institution, it's important that if you're getting advice from them, that you make sure that they are a consultant in good standing. So you can search there and you can see, do they have any complaints against them? Is their license currently suspended or is it active? So I would certainly encourage you to do that. And then third, of course, is, oh, sorry, I think somebody was trying to share and booted you off there, Penise. Do you want to start sharing your screen again, Penise? Perfect. And the other is the immigration advising team. So on our website at mun.ca/international is where we have information, and there's many ways that we can connect with you. So just to make sure that that is very, very clear, I think this is our last quiz. So quiz 6, true or false? Number 1, my friends and family are the best source of information when it comes to immigration. Is that true or false? It is false, unless, of course, you're a family member of myself, Penise or Reefs, right? Or if you know somebody who's an immigration consultant. So thank you very much. So that one is false. And number 2, it is illegal to provide immigration advice without having appropriate license and authorization. And this one is true. So in Canada, it is a regulated profession. People can certainly face enforcement action if they do give advice when they're not a regulated consultant. So just, that is really there to protect the consumer. So make sure that, you know, you're getting it from the right source. All right, next slide. So we have a Brightspace course shell, and Brightspace just refers to the platform where kind of all the online courses are happening at Memorial. And even if your course isn't online, and of course, you should be wary of taking many online courses as an international student, but even if it's not, your professor may have and may be sharing information through the Brightspace course shell. So if you have your MUN login, if you go to online.mun.ca, this is where you would log in to this Brightspace platform. And you might not see our course there yet, but you will. Okay, we'll start to add students for the fall in about mid-August when we see students are registered for their courses. And you might already be registered for fall, but it's going to be starting mid-August that we'll start to add students to it. So around that time, you can log in to online.mun.ca and you will see in your course list a course that says Immigration Support for International Students. Okay. We deliver weekly information sessions, and in the fall, so starting in September, we're going to be doing them every Wednesday. And that's where you would log in to attend that live session. Okay, it is a virtual live session. In addition to that live session, we will have recordings of other topics which you can view to get information about where we'll be presenting. And we will also have quizzes, right? To be able to kind of test and assert, like, the information that was presented, that you have a good understanding. And the calendar is there, as you can see down the right-hand side, that would give kind of the schedule of our sessions. So it is a great tool and resource to kind of see ways and to get information. All right, next slide there, Denise. So outside of the Brightspace, there are different points of contact, basically, and ways that you can connect with the IAT or the Immigration Advising Team. We have one-on-one appointments, and they're 30-minute appointments. Those appointments currently are booked through my.mun.ca, but we are looking at other booking appointment platforms. But if that changes, we'll let you know. So you basically, you'll have an appointment booking platform where you can go in, you can see all the available appointments and just book one. Okay. We also will have times throughout the week when if you can't get an appointment or you want to speak to somebody urgently, then we will have an hour basically every day where you can go into a waiting room and be admitted one at a time for one-on-one advising. So it's drop-in, and drop-ins basically mean first come, first serve, but we're going to be doing them virtually. So you're not sitting in an office, you're in the comfort of your own home, and you're in a virtual kind of waiting room. We also will have a live session then on Wednesdays, which again will be virtual, and that will happen in that Brightspace platform we showed you. And we will have various recordings on the different topics we'll be talking about in our Wednesday sessions. And you can also send us an email at immigrationadvising@mun.ca. So we have a 1 business day response time to that email. So if you have a question, you can go there. And we will be updating on our website ways that you can connect with an immigration advisor and those different points of contact. So right now we have our schedule in there for our spring semester, which we're currently in. And at the end of August, we'll be updating that with our fall semester. Okay, so how to connect, I'll put that link in the chat. Okay. So at this point, Bahar, we can stop the recording. And also, Panish, you're